Hey everybody, Dimitri here. And if you are shopping for a bike to start doing some hard enduro, or to maybe you've tried a couple events and you want to get a hard enduro specific motorcycle, then this video is for you. So first thing I want to say is that bike selection is super subjective. So before you start typing in the comments, I think the best motorcycle for any purpose, hard enduro, soft enduro, trail riding, adventure riding, track, whatever, is first of all the one you already have, and second of all the one you like. So if you've got a bike in your garage that you like for whatever reason, it might be ergonomics, it might be the way it looks, it might be the fact that it's carbureted, maybe you really like carburetors, and you think that bike is the best thing and you love riding it, by all means, you can turn this video off now, or you can keep watching me ramble. But for those of you who are maybe looking to get, especially if you're looking to get into hard enduro, or maybe you've tried a couple events and you're looking for a bike specifically for hard enduro, this video is for you. So a little bit about me, just so you can compare your own experience and skill level better. So I'm a B-level rider. I do enduros. I've done a couple seasons of hard enduro here in the United States now. B-level is approximately intermediate if you're trying to compare it internationally. About 5'11" tall and about 180 pounds. So I'm a very medium build type of person. So let's dive into it. And the first thing I'll just cover right off the bat, because I can see people spooling up their comment fingers right now, is yes, this is a TPI. This is a 2023 GasGas EC 300. It's a TPI. It's not the new TBI, which is supposed to be the best thing since sliced bread. And right off the bat, I will tell you why I think a TPI bike, especially if you're just getting into it, is maybe a better choice. Might not be, depends on your situation, but hear me out. First of all, the value. You can buy these bikes used, or maybe some leftovers stashed in a corner somewhere, for crazy good prices. A lot of people trail ride these, so you see a lot of them with super low hours, really gently ridden and in great condition. And you can literally buy them for half the price of what you'd pay for a brand new TBI. And so that's the first reason for potentially looking at a TPI bike versus a TBI. The second reason is TPI has been out since 2017, I think. 2018 maybe is when it first started coming out. So it's been out for a while. And this chassis has been out for a while. Yes, they did an update in 2020, but overall the suspension, the frame, all that stuff has been pretty similar. And the 23 is the last year of this chassis, and it is also the best. So you're buying the most refined version of this generation of a KTM bike. And I think there's a lot to that, because as you know, anytime there's a fresh redesign, there's all kinds of, they can only test so much. And as you can see with people having weird issues with their new TBI bikes, it's nice not to have those. And I'll kind of get into some other bits here in a bit, but something that I also wanted to mention about the TPI bike, as far as it being maybe a little bit better for hard enduro, is that these frames famously are much less stiff than when KTM went to TBI, to the new platform. They actually use the same frame for motocross bikes, enduro bikes, off-road bikes. They went to kind of a shared platform. So the frames got a lot stiffer, and you can feel that if you ride a new TBI bike and this bike back to back, you can feel that immediately. The new bike is very stiff. It's very precise, but it's very stiff. It feels like a Japanese aluminum frame bike. So for hard enduro, where you're riding a lot of this kind of stuff, a lot of potentially, bigger hits, maybe rocks, really rough terrain, but at lower speeds, we don't necessarily need that like crazy stiff stability. because you're not going very fast. This old school, it's not even old school, but older steel frame is, I feel like, is superior. And you're always saving money buying used, and if you're going to get into hard enduro, you will beat your bike up. So it's nice not buying something brand new and immediately destroying it. So that's something to seriously consider. You can buy a really low hour one of these, and you're not going to feel as bad beating up on it, because you've paid 25, 30, 50% less than you would for a brand new motorcycle, and somebody else has already depreciated it for you. So the next aspect after value, I think, is the fact that this bike is pretty much ready to go out of the box. Everything on it is maybe not the best, but everything on it is damn good. Engine's good, suspension's good, and we'll dive into the individual components a little more. It's, you know, you slap on some protective bits and you pretty much go ride it out of the box. You don't need to do a ton of mods. You don't need to revalve the suspension. You don't need to tune the engine or add a bunch of stuff. It's good to go. The next two big things are the fact that it's linkage. So if you're considering this versus a KTM, let's say, I think, especially if you're newer to the hard enduro scene, I think linkage is far superior, unless you're super tall. And here's why: because this bike sits lower than a KTM, and it's much easier to dab. You don't need to do anything with the suspension. If you're approximately my height, you will be able to dab fairly easily, and that is very helpful in technical terrain. I also like linkage at speed. I think it works much better across a variety of terrain without having to mess with your sag all the time. So at speed, this bike stays very stable, even on a soft tire. So if you're also doing some trail riding, I think it is very beneficial to have linkage. And you will see a lot of people say that they prefer the KTM because it doesn't get stuck on anything. The linkage doesn't get stuck on anything. Honestly, if I had to choose between dabbing and getting my linkage caught, I would prefer to be able to dab any day of the week, because the linkage doesn't actually get stuck very often. I can count probably on my fingers from 2 seasons of hard enduro and 200 hours, the times I've been stuck on my linkage, and fingers of one hand. I think it probably was 4 times maybe, and that's about it. It just doesn't happen that often. And with these new modern skid plates that slide over everything, that is pretty much a non-issue. So linkage is definitely my preference, and I would highly recommend you try linkage if you haven't already, and if you've been on KTMs. So next up, one big thing is the aluminum subframe. You can't really see it here. You might be able to see it on this side. So the entire section from here back of the motorcycle there's basically nothing there. There's just an aluminum subframe. It's very small. The frame pretty much ends right here where you can kind of see it. And if you're comparing this to, let's say, a Husky, we're in the KTM world now. Husky plastic composite subframe, it breaks. You'll hear stories that people, yeah, you might not break it, you might break it. From my personal experience, I've broken 2 of them. I've also bent 3 aluminum subframes. On this bike, I've bent it twice, but the nice thing is you just take the plastics off and you can straighten it. You can jam something long in here and just wrench on it and it will straighten. And it's also a lot harder to break. The problem with the Husqvarnas is that if you do break it, it's a race ender, it's a weekend ender, you're basically done if you break it bad enough. On this, if you bend, it's pretty hard to bend, first of all, and then if you do bend it, everything is still together. Worst case scenario is your tire is going to rub your exhaust. So I think the aluminum subframe is far superior. It is also cheaper. The entire aluminum subframe is cheaper than half of a Husky composite subframe. All right, next up, let's talk about the suspension. So if you don't have experience with the KTM bikes, you will hear all sorts of stories about how bad the Explorer suspension is. The forks are open cartridge Explorer, the shock is Exact Pro or something like that. So the shock is actually really good. I think most people agree that the shock is very serviceable. The forks are very soft. I'm not going to argue that fact. They don't have a ton of damping, but I find that they are actually really good. And this comes back to the whole refinement thing. I also own a 2018 KTM, and the forks on that are pretty scary if you start riding a little bit more aggressively. But in 5 years that they've been doing this, every year they refine the valving, they change things a little bit. And I feel like by 2023, they've got it pretty dialed, given kind of what they have to work with internally with the forks. I think they are actually quite good. I race enduros here in Michigan as well, and our enduros are really fast. And honestly, the only time I found that I really started lacking suspension is actually at a hare scramble where the track started getting really, really rough. And you're fourth, fifth gear through some pretty gnarly terrain, and that's where I'm starting to run out of suspension. But really at B30 plus pace, it's enough for me to put it on the podium. And one of the guys that I ride with, he's mid-pack A class on stock suspension. My suspension is fully stock, and I've been very happy with it. And since we're talking about hard enduro, I think this suspension also works super well for hard enduro. I actually personally would prefer it over the new closed cartridge stuff. And that is because, first of all, it's much more bouncy, so you actually almost get like this trials bike bounciness. So when you're trying to do some maneuvers, it's a lot easier. It absorbs the big stuff very well and gives you that planted feel. And it's also way easier to service, because hard enduro, again, you ride in the mud, you ride in all kinds of stuff, so you're going to need to potentially do your seals and stuff more often. And open chamber, open cartridge suspension is, you can do it yourself with very minimal tools in your own garage in like an hour. It's very easy to service compared to the closed cartridge stuff. And again, this is out of the box. I just want to mention that you don't have to do anything with it. It just out of the box. I usually use either standard or comfort settings, and most of the time it's standard settings. So even messing with the clickers for me personally is not necessary. And lastly, about the suspension is that it is actually very comfortable. So even if it's not the most high performance suspension, it does not beat you up. So if you're doing a hard enduro race and you're riding this super bumpy trail for 6 hours nonstop, this is a very comfortable suspension to be on. Same thing if you're just on a hard enduro trail ride. If you're riding all day over a bunch of rocks and whatnot, this is a very comfortable suspension to be on that just doesn't beat you up. Especially if you're not trying to go, really like super hammer through stuff. But if you're just trying to be on the bike for a very long period of time. So let's talk about the engine, because again, if you're looking at all kinds of videos on the internet and you're looking at bikes, a lot of people will say TPI sucks and that they prefer the carburetor. And I think to a big extent, that is personal preference. I actually really like the power delivery of the fuel injected bikes because it's very predictable. I think that especially if you are somebody that is, beginner to intermediate level, I think you will benefit from the predictability of fuel injection. I think TPI and TBI XCW's power delivery is pretty similar. So it's great because in hard enduro, the main thing is managing traction, and the more predictable power you have, the better. The other aspect I will mention is the fact that it doesn't vibrate. Betas and Shercos are now counterbalanced, and it's better than it was, but there's no comparison to the KTM. KTM has by far the smoothest two-stroke engines out there. The fuel economy on these is actually really good. So again, comparing it to the TBI models, the TPI actually gets better gas mileage. You can get more miles out of the tank, which is good if you're going out riding somewhere gnarly and far away from the truck. And it's also good at hard enduro races because you don't need to pit. You fill up at the start, you do your laps, and it can actually be a pretty significant performance advantage if you don't need to go your truck in the middle of a race or stop at the pits for, you know, a couple minutes to put gas in your bike. So I think it's a definite benefit. And that actually brings me to another point about fuel injection, is that you don't leak gas. So if you're out playing around doing stuff that's challenging for you and your bike's upside down constantly, it doesn't constantly leak gas. I've been on rides on my old bike, on my old carburetor bike, where I'd go maybe 2 miles and I'd be down a half a tank just because my bike is on its side so much that I just leak a gallon of gas on the ground. And another thing that is, of course, one of the most important things for technical riding is the clutch. And I don't need to go into it too far because you've probably seen it in a billion other videos, but the KTM clutch system is the best. It is the most reliable. It is just the best for technical riding, or probably in general. Next super important thing, if you're getting into hard enduro, you probably know that you will break some stuff. And if you ride a lot or you want to ride a lot, then having part availability is super important. And aside from maybe the Japanese bikes, the KTM group has by far the best part availability here in the US. Parts are not crazy expensive. Some things are more expensive, some less than other European brands, but they're not bad because there's so much of them. And not just OEM parts, which you can get anywhere, everywhere, a lot of times either overnight or you can get them at a local dealer, but also aftermarket parts. So you actually have a lot of options, like, you know, let's say you break your clutch cover or you break a lever or something like that. You don't have to go try to buy stock levers or stock shifters or stock pipes, because anybody that's going to make an aftermarket anything, they will make it for a KTM. So it's a huge benefit to be on such a popular brand from just a parts availability perspective. It is just way easier to keep your bike running and operating and fixed up. And also, if you are at a race and you have a problem, or even at a riding area and you have a problem, a lot of times you'll be able to just walk around and find somebody that either knows how to fix it or has parts, or both, because these bikes are just popular and you see a ton of them at races, you see a ton of them at riding areas. Everybody's done the research for you, so you can pretty much go on a Facebook group or in a forum or ask your buddy and say, hey, what tires are universal, but like, what rear sprocket should I run? Hey, what should I do with my suspension? Hey, what kind of seat do you recommend? Hey, what kind of exhaust do you recommend? So not only is there a ton of aftermarket support, but also there's a lot of knowledge. So you don't need to figure all this stuff out yourself from scratch. And then finally, a word on the reliability and durability, because there's a lot of, if you're looking on the internet, you will undoubtedly watch a bunch of videos or see a bunch of posts about people saying, oh, KTMs break all the time, fuel injection is unreliable. And that is just not true. There's no actual, I would say, hard evidence that there's been, widespread issues. Every bike will have its little bit of issues, but like, I personally don't know of anybody or have never seen or met anybody that had their TPI bike seized, for example. There's probably people that have had them seized, but KTM makes probably 10 times more motorcycle or dirt bikes than every other brand. So if they have 10 issues and one other brand has one issue, they are still the same percentage. And you know, obviously you can do your own research there, but from my experience, I would not hesitate buying one of these TPI bikes from a reliability perspective. From everybody that I've seen, all the hard enduro races, everybody's found these bikes super reliable, have not had really any serious issues on them. And that goes both for the injection system and also the oil injection system. The only oil injection thing that I've known and personally experienced to happen is there's a little rubber elbow that cracks, and you just keep an eye on it and you replace it when you see it cracking. Again, this bike gets abused hard. It's got 185 hours and it's been absolutely solid. Starts every single time. So as far as the reliability, I have zero issues with it. And the same goes for durability. I've had a bunch of different bikes over the years, and I've probably put more abuse onto this bike and also the GasGas that I rode in Romania for Romaniacs than any other motorcycle I've ever owned. And they are stupid durable. You can drop them on a bunch of rocks. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. And I've not even, like, I've broken shifters, foot pegs, all that kind of stuff. But as far as the core motorcycle, and plastics obviously, it's like, honestly, I have not even bent the handlebars. I don't understand how, but I have not. It's just been super durable, which is just awesome if you're trying to, you know, go do stuff like this. So hopefully this video has been helpful. If you guys are looking for a bike to do hard enduro on, I would absolutely invite you to give the TPI GasGas bikes a look. And if you guys have any questions or comments or want to share your own experiences, by all means, leave a comment, and I will be happy to discuss anything with you or answer any questions. And hope to see you all out on the trails.